Right, good morning. So today, first, a little bit of housekeeping, as we say in English, to tidy up a couple of ideas or points that I perhaps should have mentioned earlier, which I didn't. So we have here, source 11, is a perush on the Rambam. It's called Yad Pshuta, from Nachum Eliezer Rabinovich. And he's writing on the core, the central Rambam that we're learning, that somebody who does not believe in, or somebody who believes in Hagshama, incorporeality, is a min. Hamafarshim loy motzu makor megula shaboy nikra emuna koizeva zois minus. The Mefarshim did not find an explicit source that somebody who believes this, it is minus. Afal gav sheposhatu b'chol ha'Torah. Even though, of course, it is central, it is important to realize that we should reject any suggestion of Hashem being corporeal. It's self-explanatory. Although there is no specific makor. Because you could not subscribe to the idea of the oneness and the uniqueness of Hashem, and at the same time subscribe to the idea that he has a body in any way, shape, or form. Like the Rambam says in Meira Gimel Amatei, Ki ein yichud kim basaras hagashmus. Now, that's not really a chiddush. We've kind of covered this before. But look at what he says now. Interesting idea. This is why I wanted to show it to you. One of the reasons. V'shema yesh lahasmich lezeh ma shenikru hanoitzrim minim. You will find generally in halachic literature Christians and Christianity referred to as minus. Why? He says perhaps the idea is because Yisoid emunasam hoisa keilu chas v'shalom yesh hoiloda lema'ala v'yesh lo ben kaviyachol. Because the basis of the idea, one of the very important ideas in fundamental ideas in Christianity, is the idea that Yeshu is Afrolapumayu, God's son. So Hashem can give birth to a physical son. V'yesh le ben kaviyachol. Ve'ein lecha hagshama gedola mizu. And you could not possibly conceive of a greater manifestation of corporeality than fathering a son, literally a physical son. That is it doesn't get worse than that. And he quotes Yerushalmi. It's quite interesting. Ein Yerushalmi Shabbos al mash'oma Nebuchadnezzar. V'rud di revia demab lebar alchin. Pasuk in Daniel. Koi omar Rabbi Reuven. Ba'oisa sha'a yolad malach v'sotre lahu risha al piv. When Nebuchadnezzar uttered this, we'll see what it was in a minute, a malach goes down and slaps Nebuchadnezzar. Omale takin milid ubarisle. Really? Because Nebuchadnezzar was suggesting that Hashem had a son. So the malach comes and says, don't be so stupid. According to one girsa, Shemo minus bali yadcha. Maybe you have encountered an idea of minus. Amalei Akiva is kartani pam echad umatzosi adam echad mitalmidei Yeshu hanoitzri. Hareshenikru minim hamaminim emunazu. So you see in that girsa in the Gemara at least the conflation of the idea of minus and natsrus going together. Fine. And then he quotes V'ain milchamas Hashem l'Reb Avram ben Rambam Madur Magolius shematzbia al hanoitzrim kemagshimim. Reb Avram ben Rambam, in his Sefer Milchamas Hashem, which he wrote to defend his father's honor, which we're going to come to shortly, and he writes, quote, V'nei hanoitzrim loikchim divrei hanavim al pashtom ad she'osu laboirei ben. What the Noitzrim did, what the Christians did, was take the words of Nevi'im very, very literally, to the point that they made that Hashem, so to speak, Chas v'Shalom, has a son. So this is an idea, this minus idea of Hagshama is one that we ascribe very much as one of the fundamental ideas in Christianity, and we reject it. And that alone was enough reason for us to reject Christianity. Right. Although, without going into, the difference between early and later Christianity. Anyway, source 12 is a Kesef Mishnah, and I can't believe that I very There's no excuse. I didn't learn the Kesef Mishnah with you on the Rambam. We learned the Raavad, the famous Rambam and Raavad. We didn't learn the Kesef Mishnah. Look at the Lashon of the Kesef Mishnah. The Kesef Mishnah, of course, is Rabbi Yosef Karo. Yes, of course. So, Kosovo Raavad, Velama Korel Zemin, Ham Shabshis Adas, Ad Kan L'Shoinei. Says the Kesef Mishnah, V'yesh litmoya al peh kodosh. Fascinating. Says the Beis Yosef, says Rabbi Yosef Karo. He's very alarmed and consternation. He said, Litmoya peh kodosh. The Raavad, Eich yikra la'imrim shu gufu bal tvuna, Gedolim v'toivim mimenu. How on earth could you possibly say, how could the peh kodosh of the Raavad suggest that there are Gedolim v'toivim mimenu and they believe in Hagshama? It's unthinkable. Ve'efsha she'ikka hanusach k'meshakosah b'sefer ha'ikrim. Maybe he says that the main nusach is as is brought in the Sefer HaIkrim, Rabbi Yosef Alba. What does he say? V'zel ha'shayne. Omar Avraham. So he's quoting the Raavad. Afal pi she'ikar ho'emunah kein. Sorry? Yeah. Afal pi she'ikar ho'emunah kein. Hamamin he'yosei guf mitzad tfisosei l'shoynes apsukim v'amidrashes kipashton ein ro'oi likroison min. So the Ikrim quotes the Raavad in a slightly more mild-mannered fashion. Not Gedolim v'tovim mimenu, but he is prepared to be somewhat more favorably disposed. Of course, it's wrong, it's rubbish, but somebody who makes a mistake in the psukim, in the midrashos, because after all, as we've discussed, it would look that way. So of course he's wrong, but such a person, ein ro'oi likroisim in. It's one thing to say, says the Kesef Mishnah, that ein ro'oi likroisim in, but it's quite another to say that somebody who believes it is gedolim v'tovim mimenu. V'gam lefinus chaseinu zoisos hakavanosai. And even if you say the Raavad used very sharp words, but surely that's what he meant. What he meant was, what was the thrust of his comment? The point of his comment was, ein ro'oi likroisim in. That's the main nakuda. What's really interesting, last thing here, source 13, is the note at the bottom of Yad Pshuta. Now, the Yad Pshuta was Reb Nachum Eliezer Rabinovich. He was the principal of Jews College, or Montefiore College, and as it was called then, Reb Nachum Eliezer Rabinovich. The same one as source 11, but there's a note down the bottom, and I've reproduced it here. Look at this. He says, Lifnei Baal Migdal Oiz, the author of the Migdal Oiz had the Girsa Gedolim V'Tovim Mimenu. Those three words. Gedolim v'tovim mimenu, ulefichach toma ma'od al asogozu v'chein marana b'kesef Mishnah kosav yesh litmei al peh kodesh. Right? However, b'ksav yad Montefiore hanimtza b'beis medrashenu v'chein b'ksav yad Cambridge lesser tevas mimenu. There are three main, I think one is Ksav Yad Paris, if I'm not mistaken, of the Raavad, and there it says the word mimenu, but in the Ksav Yad of the Raavad that they have in Montefiore, Ksav Yad Montefiore, which they have in Jews College, and in Cambridge, the word mimenu is missing. And this takes the sting out of the tail a lot. Yeah? We had the Chazon Ish jumping through hoops to say mimenu means from within us, not that greater than the Rambam. And you're going to see in a minute that Ur Sameach quotes an Ur Zorua, which we're going to learn now on the next page. But if you have these two Gersois in the Montefiore Ksav Yad and the Cambridge one, that word mimenu is missing. So Gedolim v'Tovim, they were good and great and good people. Okay.
That's like the Chazon Ish then.
Yeah, absolutely. In meaning, correct.
The Christian, so what's the...
Correct. So it softens the blow somewhat. I saw somebody quotes that, and I can't remember who wants to change the mimenu to add in an ayin, me amenu, or me imanu, whatever. But what was really interesting is, sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But that's it. Just an interesting historical point that we have some Kisvei Yad where that word mimenu is missing.
Do you know if the Raavad supervised the printing of his commentary on the Rambam, or is that like who have a lot of
printing?
Oh no, he's way earlier. No, it cannot. Yeah, obviously.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, no problem.
Anyway, so that makes
Yes,
it very
Xavier.
reasonable to assume
Of
that there
course,
was
yeah.
a lot of difference.
And there are two kisvei yad, Xavier Montefiore, Xavier Cambridge, where that word mimenu is missing.
Printing,
Yeah,
Gutenberg is on him.
that's right. Pre-Gutenberg. Okay, so incunabula or whatever. Right. The Ur Sameach quotes an Ur Zorua who quotes a Rabbeinu Hananel, and I've reproduced it here because it's fundamental. It's quite an important one. Okay. Remember the Ibn Ezra on the Gemara that Hashem puts on tefillin, and what does it say in his tefillin, and he showed the knot of his tefillin, etc. Right? Says the Ur Zorua. So give you some context. Right? An important Rishon. Says the Ur Zorua in Hilchos Kriyashma. He quotes the Gemara. This is source 14. Omar Rovin Barav Adam Rav Yitzchak Minayin Shakadosh Baruch Hu Menech Tefillin Shenem Menish Basham Bimini B'Yisrael Uzay Eini Mini Elator Shenem Mimini Shtei Slob Uzay Zet Tefillin Shenem Hashem Yisrael Mitet Baruch Lamas Teshem Megolech Tan Reb Lezag Aloi Beilis Tefillin Shebrei Shem Alev Nachma Yitzchak Elohim Barav Harei Tefillin Demarim Magsiv Bu. What does it say in Hashem's Tefillin? Amali Bikam Chisol Gechel Boretz V'Chim Shtabach Kuch B'Rich V'Shimcha Yisrael Amali In Sev Hashem Pirush Rabbeinu Hananel Zatzal. Bold, yeah. Rabbeinu Hananel explains Shehakadosh Baruch Hu. This is Rabbeinu Hananel, right? So this is very early and very fundamental. I didn't look, but I don't think it is. I should have done. That's a bit naughty of me. I don't think it's on the side of the page in Brachos. I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong. It's quoted here by the Ur Zorua. Pirush Rabbeinu Hananel Zatzal. Shehakadosh Baruch Hu mara kvoidoi l'neviyav v'chasidov be'uvnus deliba kidmus odom yoshev. HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows a vision of kavod to his Nevi'im and his pious ones, an image, be'uvnasa deliver, an image that they can conjure up, kidmus Adam Yoshev, as if it is a man sitting on a throne. Ro'ises Hashem Yoshev al kisei, v'eres Hashem Yoshev al kisei, u'kmi sheyesh le raglayim, as if he has legs. Once we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears or wishes to be perceived in some sense, figuratively, to the Nevi'im in this way, Nizbarer lanu ki zeh ha're'iyah ha'amura b're'iyas halev v'lo b're'iyas ha'ayin. This is the main thrust, the main point here. Says Rabbeinu Hananel, we have numerous psukim in the Torah, in Nevi'im, that talk about seeing Hashem, using the word vayar, vayiru, kamare, to see. And what they are shown are things which we know cannot be, are not physically so. Cannot be. They're not physical. So therefore, what does that show us, says Rabbeinu Hananel? That shows us, nizbarer lanu, ki zeh ha're'iyah ha'amura. What is it referring to? Re'iyas halev and not re'iyas ha'ayin.
But that's a problem.
That's the solution.
Well, that's a problem. Like if I would daven Shemona Esrei, I would kind of think that I'm davening to someone sitting on a chair with legs and everything.
Well, then you shouldn't.
Exactly, but they seem to do. And they have a nevuah. They seem to.
That's what Hashem wishes. Hashem shows them a vision. He wishes them to perceive his kavod figuratively. They didn't actually see. It wasn't with their eyes. This is using the heart. We'll talk about what Re'iyas Halev is. But obviously, why does Rabbeinu Hananel say it was Re'iyas Halev and not Re'iyas Einayim? Because it can't be Re'iyas Einayim. Because it doesn't exist.
Right.
That is exactly the point. Yeah. Re'iyas Ha'ayin. Well, Re'iyas Halev. Let's give him a chance. Let's see. Ki lo yitochen le'omer b'Re'iyas Ha'ayin. You cannot. It is utterly unimaginable. That was the wrong word. It is unacceptable to suggest. One cannot countenance the idea that when it says all these Nevi'im from Klal Yisrael to Yeshaya, etc., Yechezkel, that they saw B'Re'iyas Ha'ayin sheniras d'mus l'Kodesh Baruch Hu shene'emar ve'el mi tadamyuni el umad mus ta'archu lai. Equally, we are told you cannot envisage any physical characteristics at all to him. So it must be Re'iyah Belevu. Kachi tochen loimer. She'efshel ha'adam lirois b're'iyas halev dmus kovoid b'roish v'olav tefillin. It is therefore similarly possible that a person can see with re'iyas halev, he can imagine, you use the word imagine, which is an interesting word, but let's run with it. You can imagine, you can perceive of a concept with re'iyas halev of a dmus of kovod, with a being wearing tefillin. V'ha'omer ro'isi re'iyas halev. So somebody, and he's now going to prove, using psukim, that you can use that word, ro'isi, to mean re'iyas halev. Dichsev, v'libi ro'a harbe chochma. Shlomo HaMelech says, my heart has seen much wisdom. Harbe chochma v'das. V'kach kavanosoi v'lo re'iyas ayin mamish. Shehinei b'feirush omar hakosov. V'dibarti al anviim u'biyad hanavim adame. Melamed shemare le'neviov, says Rabbeinu Chananel. This shows us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows Nevi'im dimyoin a comparative concept sheyochel lirois, something that they can perceive of, something that they can relate to. Aval re'iyah mamash, but what we normally mean when we use the word seeing, meaning physical seeing, chas v'shalom. Sheyesh mi sheyala al datoi. When the Gemara in Brachos quotes Rabbi Yitzchak, who says HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts on tefillin, is he going to argue on the Torah? Shenema ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai? Uba Rabbi Yitzchak v'omar ki nira HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Can't be. Of course not. V'oid, hoksiv vayiru es Elokei Yisrael v'sachas raglov, hinei mare hakosov shero'u. The Pasuk says they saw. Umikra acheksiv ki lo yirisem kol tmuna. Kosher kroya hadodi. Rabbeinu Chananel does an incredible thing. There are two psukim in the Torah which would appear to be, says Rabbeinu Chananel, a flat-out contradiction. One pasuk says, "Vayiru es Elokei Yisrael, v'sachas raglov, kamase livnas hasapir," talks about raglov and vayiru, and then what does the pasuk say in Voice Hanan when it warns us after telling us to remember the whole awesome, terrifying spectacle of Matan Torah? What does it say? Be very careful. Ki lo re'isem kol tmuna b'yom diber Hashem. You saw no tmuna. Pardon? The pasuk says in Mishpatim, they saw Hashem, v'tachas raglov, livnas hasapir, sapphire. What do you mean lo ra'u kol tmuna? Of course they did. You have two psukim that seem flatly to contradict each other. In parentheses, I wish to add, Maramokim ani lachem, there's a Tikkunei Zoyar, which the Nefesh HaChaim brings, and now I'm really need to put the two together, where there is, the Pasuk says about Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah, Utmunas Hashem Yabit. I quote, Utmunas Hashem Yabit. He sees a tmuna of Hashem. At the same time, we are told that level of nevuah, when we achieve the same level of nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which was at Matan Torah, we're told lo re'isem kol tmuna.
Isn't the shoresh from tmuna also? What's the other meaning from tmuna? The shoresh, is it like an imprint also, or like a stem?
I'm not sure.
Is there another meaning for it?
I don't know. I haven't got that far yet in Chavis Alvaras. But the Tikkunei Zoyar engages in an interesting answer, which maybe I'll mention it tomorrow. But here we have a Rabbeinu Chananel asking a flat-out contradiction in two psukim. Look what he says. Nefarkei. So he says, Koshu kroya adodi. We have a steer in psukim. Nefarkei, we will answer, Loi kashya. Hi, krodich sevayiru re'iyas halev. V'hodich ziv ki lo re'isem kol tmuna re'iyas ha'ayin. Elegant, profound, yesodistic, Rabbi say, remember this Rabbeinu Chananel. Very, very, I am ashamed to say that I've never seen this Rabbeinu Chananel before I saw it as I was preparing Unbelievable. Beautiful Yesodistic Rabbeinu Hananel. Doesn't get much more Yesodistic than that, as the Rishonim say about him, Ki kol dvarav divrei Kabbalah. The Rosh and others always say about Rabbeinu Hananel, kol dvarav divrei Kabbalah. Yeah? So, one of the Arba Shvuyim, right? We're going right back to the beginning of early Rishonim. So what does he say? We have a stiren, Nochamo. There's stiren psukim. The pasuk says, "Vayiru es Elokei Yisrael v'sachas raglov," and then we say, "Lo risem kol tmuna, lo kashya." One is re'iyas oinayim, one is re'iyas halev. What they saw was v'sachas raglov, was re'iyas halev. Hakadosh Baruch Hu wanted them to conjure up an image of some sort, but of course doesn't depict reality. Chas v'shalom, they didn't see this with their eyes because it's impossible. You can't see something with your eyes that doesn't exist. It's a concept. Beautiful. Umatzanu lashon hakodesh shekora be'inyan hazeh re'iyah shene'emar vayar Yaakov ki yesheva b'Mitzrayim. We read, the parasha just a few weeks ago. Vayar Yaakov ki the children come back, the Meraglim, the Shvatim come back, and they tell their father, there's food in Mitzrayim. Vayar Yaakov ki yesheva b'Mitzrayim. He sees that there's food in Mitzrayim. He wasn't there. Can't be a physical seeing, says Rabbeinu Hananel. He's never there. V'Yaakov lehoya b'Mitzrayim ki im beretz Canaan. V'kohen rabbis ulemevinei da'as yirei shamayim pochus mizeh dai lohem lahovin v'leida. Very strong words here. I should have really put these in bold. I'm sorry. Should be underlined. Look at this. Ulemevinei da'as yirei shamayim, says Rabbeinu Hananel. Those who really understand matters and have yirei shamayim. Even though pochus mizeh, even though they might not be on a great level, but dai lohem lahovin uleida, it's enough for them just to know she'ein b'chol haTalmud moidia sheyesh b'Yisrael noisen dmus lebayreinu yis'aleh shmoi v'zichroi. There is no suggestion anywhere in Chazal, Chas v'Shalom, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is corporeal in any way, shape or form. That he has a way, shape or form. Omnom, Chel Kelev Rishei Ha'oretz Haminin, Chalok Kelev, the smooth, those of smooth hearts. Don't know it's not a compliment. The Rishoyim, Haminim, Mechap'in Dvorim, Loikein, Kedei Leganos Atzmam. The Minim, and presumably he's referring to Christianity, it would seem. They suggest that in the Talmud there are these ideas, and they say things which do not exist in order to protect themselves, in order to try and find proof for themselves, apologetics. Mishepora midor amabul hu yipora mehem. He curses them. Umatzanu shakadosh baruch hu yishtabach shmoi herel Moshe Rabbeinu b'toich hakovod shnema hakodesh baruch hu b'roisas hachoyrai kegoin malach u'b'roishay tefillin v'ra Moshe v'havin kesher shel tefillin v'shin shel tefillin ke'inyan shereu klei hamishkan. In the same way that he showed him the klei hamishkan shenema kechel hashani mare oischa es tamnis hamishkan es tamnis kol kelov v'zeh yitochen l'maris ha'ayin v'yitochen l'riyas halev. Now it's possible when it says "Kechayil shani mare oischa" in the same way that I am showing you the plan of the Mishkan. Now the plan of a Mishkan is a physical plan, so it's theoretically possible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have shown him with his eyes. It could be either he could have put into his heart the ability to see in his mind's eye with his heart the plan of the Mishkan, or it could have been he showed him physically. That's possible. Aval zeh shekosav ra'isas hachoyrai. But when it says you shall see my back, Einoi elo re'iyas halev, it can only mean re'iyas halev. Val oisa ha're'iyah nema, shenema b'moshe shero kesher shel tefillin v'shen shel tefillin, Omer Rabbi Yitzchak remez l'davar, l'zeh ha'davar min ha'kosav minayin shenema nishba Hashem b'yaminoi. He brings a raya, a remez, because it says, nishba Hashem b'yaminoi, u'beinin hazeh chazoin ha'nevuah, ha'novi yoshev eir. This is actually really interesting, and this I've just chapped. This is problematic according to the Rambam and others. He says, when there is a Chazoin HaNevuah, the Novi sits awake. V'liboi roye Chazoin HaNevuah. And his heart sees the Chazoin HaNevuah, k'moi re'iyas hayoshin b'chaloim. The only thing I would like to be ma'orer is that we understand from the Rambam and others that when a Novi other than Moshe Rabbeinu had Nevuah, he was not Yoshev Eir. He lost consciousness. So I just want to highlight that. I don't have a...
Air is just...
Eir is to be awake. Yoshev Eir. He's sitting awake. In fact, he's using it because to say... In other words, he's almost as if he wants to get he wants a situation where he could theoretically have seen something physically, but it's not that. It's the Chazoin. So the potency of it, mind you, I don't know. You could almost argue the other way. You could say that actually it would be more powerful to say that he's lost consciousness, because when you lose consciousness, you definitely do not have your faculty of sight. So it's even stronger. So why he says Yoshev Eir, I don't know. When Hashem differentiates, the Rambam writes in Yesodei HaTorah, Perek Ches, he goes through the four main differences between the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu and the others, and we'll get to it when we learn the 8th Ikka of the Rambam. But the Pasuk says there, what does the Pasuk say in Bal Yischa? B'chaloim adaber boy. When Hashem describes how he appears to the other Nevi'im, he says, B'chaloim adaber boy. I speak to them as if they're in a dream. Now, in a dream, your physical eyesight, you don't see. When what you think you see, a dream, it's not your eye seeing it, it's something else, clearly. So since all of the Nevi'im, other than Moshe Rabbeinu, are described by Hashem himself as being B'chaloim adaber boy, then Yeshaya says, Vayar va'era, and I see, it must be Re'iyas Halev. Very logical. Yeah? Beautiful. Ayin esvada b'chaloim, and b'chaloim ani Misraelai. U'medaber imay, val oisam tefillin, shenira loi l'Moshe Rabbeinu mitech hakovod, those figurative tefillin that Moshe Rabbeinu is able to see with his Re'iyas Halev. On those, Chazal said, well, what does it say in them? This concept, which he has shown figuratively, of course they're not physical, on that they were mechoika. U'mefaresh, mik'amcha Yisrael, ge'chaboras, mik'ogal, v'chalinanin, ve'elu divrei Kabbalah, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Over the page. Ve'elu divrei Kabbalah, halacha. I do apologize, because I'm trying very hard now not to mess you up with different pages. So I'm trying to do, if you noticed, always page by page. So I'll read you this. You'll get it tomorrow, whatever, when I do the next set of Maram Komas. So he says, "V'chol ha'inyan ve'elu divrei Kabbalah halacha." This is Rabbeinu Chananel. "Elu divrei Kabbalah halacha l'Moshe Sinai hoyu biyodam u'mikabbalah pirshu she'i efshel lidvarim alolu lehisparish min hadas klal ad kan l'shoinai." This is the Zarua quoting Rabbeinu Chananel, a very Yesodistic Rabbeinu Chananel. I think it's a very clear and beautiful and important Maramokim, which I'm very happy that I came across. And now we will begin to turn to some of the spicy stuff, if that's the right word. What do I mean? We will now begin to look a little bit into and one of the controversies. There is the Pulmus Rambam. The Rambam's ideas and his Sfarim generated what the historians seem to say were 4 different stages in what's known as the Pulmus, the controversy, if you like, against the Rambam. And we're going to focus a little bit on one which is directly relevant to what we are learning. I'm not here to teach history because I'm not a historian, although it's absolutely fascinating. But we're here to Torah. But let me give you the background to this is as follows. There was the first Pulmus against the Rambam almost in his lifetime. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what's probably, I think, the second one. So we're talking approximately 1230, the year 1230. Let me sketch out what is happening on the basis of my reading, and I'll put some of the, once I've done it, I'll put some of the Maramokomas up, some of these articles which I've come across. So we have the Ramban is alive. We go to the south of France, to Provence. We go to Montpellier, right? We go to Montpellier. And there is one of the Gedolim there is known as Rabbi Shlomo min Hahar. He's known as Rabbi Shlomo min Hahar. And certainly an important rishon. Maybe I should stop here and just make a quick comment, and that is, and it is actually relevant here, because there is a source from a certain Rabbi Taku, who was potentially one of the Tosafists, who seems to be very radically corporealist, meaning that he seems to suggest that Hashem did have a physical form. That's what it seems to be. And then you have certain people who come along and take this one opinion, even assuming that he was one of the Gedolim, which is unclear, but so this is how it works in the world of academia. Yeah, the weighting. Weighting is not to the lachakot. The weighting is the gewicht of an opinion, and you throw it all into the mix, and so it's an alternative of acceptable.
He was part of the Tosafist?
We'll go into that because I actually don't want to deal with him today. I just want to make a general comment, and that is, for us, not everybody, as one of my chavrusas once said to me many years ago, not every, let's say, Rav who lived at the time of the Balei Tosafists is a Rishon. In other words, we have, and this opens up another whole topic, which maybe not for now, or the Chazon Ish, the Meiri, and all this Kisvei Yad, and how we relate to it. We do believe that there is siyata dishmaya in the Mesorah of our Torah, who are considered our Gedolim. Yeah? And Klal Yisrael are very, it's a really, really interesting phenomenon. We do have, on the one hand, we have a system of peer review, which is unlike any other system of peer review. You know what peer review is? Yeah. So, once in conversation with Lord Sachs, because I was curious whenever I would encounter him and get a few minutes with him, because he was fascinating to speak to. And he had just written a book on something to do with comparative religions or whatever, whatever. That's the context, because there was some controversy at the time. But I said to him, because he was incredibly learned, and he said, and I think I saw this written somewhere, he said he read 8 books on Islam and wrote a single sentence. And then I realized it was wrong, or something like that. He really studied. So I said, tell me, Rabbi Sachs, in your delving into other comparative religions and ideas, is there anything that comes close to the oimek of a Tosfos? And he smiled, a twinkle in his eye, and he said, nah, nothing comes close to a Tosfos with all the oimek of a Tosfos. And then he said something really profound, which really has stayed with me. And that is, he says, if you think, in every academic discipline, there is peer review. How does somebody make it to become considered how did Stephen Hawking make it to become considered one of the fathers of cosmology, or Richard Feynman, or one of these other, you prove yourself within your field, you write books, and then you get, your ideas are tested, depending on which field it is, I suppose, as long as it's not one of the soft sciences, the ideas get tested, and they hold up, and they keep holding up, as Sir Karl Popper used to say. They hold up again and again and again, and they're tested, and then they get quoted, and then at some point it becomes a citation classic. I think it's 100 times when it's quoted in other papers, if I'm not mistaken, and then it goes on, but you are recognized by those who are eminent in their field themselves, and they put you on the pedestal. He said, think about, I think his words to me were, he said, think about a Rashi in the beginning of Ksubas. A Rashi in the beginning of Ksubas. Think about how many of great minds in the last 1,000 years have learnt and studied and probed and picked apart that a Rashi, which they learn, let's say, in the yeshivas, for 1,000 years, and matched it against the rest of Rabbi Kiva Eger and the Chasam Sofer and the Vilna Gaon and the Rashi, all the way down. He said, and he still learnt hundreds and thousands of times by brilliant minds who are focusing on that and nothing else for 1,000 years. He says there's nothing that even begins to come close. The scrutiny, the depth, and it's an incredibly important idea. So on the one hand, when Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal died, and the secular press were just thrown, where did 300,000 people come from? I mean, he was a Rosh Yeshiva of a small yeshiva in Yerushalayim. He wasn't active in the political sphere. Rabbi Elyashiv, maybe. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, a tiny little yeshiva in Chazon Ish had no title at all. And yet we have a nose to sniff out Al Gedolim. We also have a nose to ferret out those that are not considered Gedolim. And they may be very brilliant, but they don't make it. And that's a good thing. So not everybody that lived at the time of the Rishonim is automatically a Rishon. And there is a weighting. Of course there is a weighting, a gewicht. Having said that, therefore, when we come across as we're going to see, an aspect of a big controversy which aroused huge emotions, and then people like Rabbeinu Yonah and the Ramban and the Rokeach weigh in, then we know who we're dealing. We know who the protagonists are, and we know who Rabbeinu Yonah is. We know who the Ramban is, and they weigh in, and it gives us an incredible insight. That's just a short introduction. We're almost out of time, but we'll just get started. Tomorrow we'll continue, because I think it throws up a bunch of fascinating things. So, the Ramban was almost 40 years old, and the following happened. In Montpellier, Reb Shlomo Minahar had two main Talmidim, one of which was Rabbeinu Yonah. And Reb Shlomo Minahar and his Talmidim were very against what the Rambam had written in Moreh Nevuchim and in Sefer Hamada. And what did they do exactly? They made it known. They made it known that they were very against it. Now, a little bit of mishpachology, which again I did not know, I'm ashamed to say. The mother of the Ramban was Rabbeinu Yonah's auntie, his father's sister. So there's the first, a familial connection. And secondly, the son of the Ramban married the daughter of Rabbeinu Yonah. So they were mechutanim. Okay? Just to give a little bit of context. So what happened was, those who are misnagdim to the Rambam, they made their views known very, very clearly. Now, the problem was that they lived in a place in Provence which was occupied, mainly the Rabbanim at the time there were Talmidim of the Rambam. Okay? And they were not happy with what happened. But it seems a stronghold of Talmidim of the Rambam was in Saragossa. And therefore in Chodesh Av, 1232, they put a cherem on Reb Shlomo Minahar and Rabbeinu Yonah. And his other Talmid, Reb David ben Shmuel. They put a cherem in Saragossa to defend the Rambam's honor. They said that Reb Shlomo Minahar and his Talmidim, Rabbeinu Yonah, had been speaking against the Rambam, Moira and Mada, and they put them in cherem. So, what did they do? What was there? And here's the language. V'hinei, b'kinosenu be'esh, evrosenu, dibarnu l'chol ha'kehilos, asher b'chol malchus Aragon. We now speak to all those in the kingdom of Aragon. Lihi kohel v'lamoid al nafsham. Lihi yos yedeim imonu, lihi lochem bahem, u'lekadesh shem elokim ha'mechulal beineim. We're going to be mekadesh shem shamayim, u'lahaskim l'nadoisom, u'lacharimom, umikahal hagoyla lahavdilam me'atov adoylam. We're now going to be menada and macharim from now until ever. Kasher osinu anachnu kahal Sarakosta, shecharamnu v'nodinu, Shlomo ben Reb Avram ha'shoichin bahar, u'shnei talmidov David v'Yonah. They put them in cherem. As a response, Reb Shlomo Minahar turned to the Chachmei Tzarfas. Now, the Chachmei Tzarfas were not to be mistaken with the Chachmei Provence. The Chachmei Tzarfas had an antagonism towards philosophy, Greek and Arabic, and they were supporters of Reb Shlomo ben Ahar. So they agreed to put in Cherem anybody who learns the Sfarim of the Rambam. So we now have two Charamim in place. We have a Cherem against Reb Shlomo ben Ahar and Rabbeinu Yonah in Saragossa in 1232, and we have Kenegdom, we have a Cherem from the Rabbanit Tzarfas to put in Cherem anybody who learns the Sifrei HaRambam. And therefore the Eish HaMachlokas, the fire of Machlokas started to burn. So we have northern Spain, you have within France. The Ramban, as a response, writes two igros, two letters. The first one is known as the short letter of the Ramban, and there it's interesting, he's not yet 40, and they're turning to him, or he has authority, and he basically says to them, the first letter, the short letter, L'Nisiei Aragon, Atzile Navarra, Sare Castilia, and he says to them, please ignore the Cherem of the Chachmei Tzarfas until both sides come to Beis Din. The first thing he did, it's a relatively short letter, and he basically says, just want to quiet things down, and he says both started, rather than, without both parties being present, shooting off Haramim at each other, they should come to Beis Din, and let's hear both Stadim, and then we'll decide. Okay, I think we'll stop here for today, because we're pretty much out of time, and tomorrow we'll go into the second letter, which is the main letter. It's very long. There's no way we can even read it. It's written in poetry. It's beautiful. It is poetic. And it says a lot, and there's a lot of controversy about it, but there's some fascinating historical nuggets within it. He makes reference to the Rokeach, and there's a machlekas between historians and others, and even the Rabbanim, the Chidah, and others, whether the Rokeach is considered to be the Rebbe of the Ramban in Kabbalah, according to some. Chidah and others. There's a German connection.
I don't know anything, but that I would have never expected
Yeah. That's, and because he talks about him.
But the Rokeach was in
Worms.
Germany.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Well, so tomorrow we will begin to look into this and the response, because there are important things. It's a letter from the Ramban, so there's important Torah to be learned from it.